Welcome to Blue Light for Change once again, and we are pleased to be joined by a former police officer who, for his very own reasons, has decided that he would like to be anonymous, and we understand that totally. We are going to call him Tony. Tony, hello, welcome to Blue Light for Change.
Good morning, and thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak with you today, really, and hopefully speak to the wider world.
Tony, it's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for having the courage to speak to us, because we know it's a bit of a difficult situation for you, and it's an ongoing one as well. So we're going to be quite protected in what we do say, but if you can give us a little bit of background about yourself, go ahead.
Yes, certainly. I think it's important to go back to actually before policing to paint a small picture, and there are obviously things I'm going to leave out, but I had a pretty normal upbringing. I had very good supportive parents. I had siblings, and I was very lucky to see a very varied culture in my upbringing in places I lived. And I learned from a very early age that we are all very different people, different cultures, different ways of doing things in life. So that was the first thing. It was really important for me to understand that. In a policing sense, almost jumping forward then going backwards, I did over 15 years in the police, and I started off with a really change in life, really. I decided that it was something I wanted to do. I'd been offered a different role in a court service, and I basically opted for a community support officer role. So that was my introduction to policing. Thereafter, I went into the role as a constable and stayed in that role for a number of years, although I was really glad to be given opportunities to work with some really good people in specialist units, CID, volume crime teams, and I worked as PCs. I worked for response teams, neighbourhood policing teams. I was an APS, a TPS, exam passed officer.
So for those of us that don't really understand police terminology, when you say sort of APS, TPS, what do you mean? Just explain what those roles are.
Yeah, certainly. So what happens is, if you're a constable, obviously maybe you're going for exams, or you've got to a level where you're considering going for a sergeant role, effectively you can be appointed as an acting police sergeant. So you are a supervisor, you're a manager, you're someone that the constables can turn to when they need help. You're there to look after their welfare. And obviously you're there to make strategic decisions at the lower level of the field of policing, I say, because obviously they're above you, get inspectors and chief inspectors and so on. When you become a TPS, it normally means you've actually passed your exams and your board, or to that effect. So then you're put in position to work as a temporary police sergeant until such times as you pass your final work-based assessment, which could take a year from the time it's instigated.
Okay. Do you want to tell us the forces that you did work for? Do you want to go into that? It's completely up to you.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of collaborative working with many police forces around the country. I specifically worked for the British Transport Police. That was a police force I considered to be a specialist police force. The type of work that the British Transport Police do, realistically speaking, is not like other forces at times. There may be crossovers at times, but obviously if you consider that a lot of our work, if not 90% of it, is on the railways and the railway industry, you're dealing obviously with stakeholders, you're dealing with the public most of the time. Very sadly, you deal with a number of fatalities if you're in that position, and it can be a very vast area that you cover as well at times. So yeah, and obviously why collaborative, and why I say collaborative, it is that basically you obviously work with forces that are associated to the areas that you cover. So you could work with Surrey Police one day, Hampshire Police the next day. You might go down into Dorset Police territory. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes on between the forces, and we use their custody suites quite a lot as well.
So you were in a supervisory position, and how long were you in that position for?
That probably covered on and off a period of maybe 5 or 6 years, because it was up and down. You would do some APS work, you might have to drop back down to PC, you might then go back to APS if there was a sergeant off, and then obviously you go into the TPS role when you've passed your exams and boards, and then you might do that for a few more years as well.
Did you love what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I did love it. It was, for me, it was camaraderie. We looked after each other, not just as a team. You became a family. You really did become a family. And I'm not quite sure. In fact, I don't know if I've ever been asked a question as to when maybe I saw it going wrong. I think when we got a change in leadership at times, we had some very good chief constables over the period that I was there. I think there were some strategic decisions that were made in regards to chief constables. I also think I don't know how this worked, to be honest, and I'm going to put my hands up on this. I also believe that, I wouldn't say politically something happened, but clearly there was something that was taking place either at very senior management level, SMA level, whatever, where it was almost more important to do what the government or people upstairs wanted than to actually listen to what was going on the floor, on the shop floor.
Start to take us through what happened to you and how it all kind of ended.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there are people that are going to listen to this and know, however I put this, that who's maybe talking and whatever, but that's not material, because what's material is what happened, what I went through, and how I felt at that time, which at times, I'm going to warn you now, might get difficult for me, and it will, I think.
This is your opportunity. This is your voice coming back, because this is what we're finding, is that people who go through these misconduct investigations, they lose any type of voice against the body that are conducting the investigation. And what I have said to people is, just take your time. If you have to stop just for a few seconds and compose yourself, it's completely fine. All right. We are here as an organisation to support you. So that's it. So you just go for it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so I was going through some stuff for a partner, and that came to a point where I had actually got to the stage where I self-referred myself to PSD.
Who are explain who they are.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so they're the professional standards department. Every police force has a professional standards department, and they are the people that investigate any misconduct in police officers. And obviously, they're at times, dare I say, not liked. As I said, I referred myself to them because I was getting into a situation that I wasn't comfortable with, where minor allegations were being made against me. The use of the language that was being used against me was not appropriate, I didn't think. And I had tried to put things right, and I was failing. So I thought that the best thing I should do was to refer myself to them, to let them know what was going on. When I say refer myself to them, I wasn't referring themselves to me because I'd done something wrong. I was referring myself to them because I foresaw that there was going to be a problem in the future, because whatever I was doing and however I tried to deal with it, unfortunately, because of the circumstances I was put in by this partner, it wasn't working. There was clearly what became visible sometime later was an agenda to cause me as much problems as possible, and that I'm going to add now, that wasn't someone in a police force.
Right. Okay. Okay. So continue.
Yeah. So effectively, this went on. I carried on doing my work diligently. I was working in one particular location, and then I got a an opportunity to do something I wanted to do in the job, and I took it. And I was very, very grateful for being given that opportunity. It was working in a different location, which I'd rather not mention at the moment, but it helped me out tremendously, given some of the pressures I was under. And it was really good. It was a location I knew. I really appreciated the support I got from my line managers at that location, and I appreciated the feedback I was getting from the officers under my command, and also the other sergeants that I was working with. So it was going well. It was all going well. There was one issue that I was having. I was struggling a little bit with my work-based assessment. So I'd come to the point where I thought, right, I've got to talk to someone about this, and I did. And I talked to a couple of people on this particular day, and that everything kicked off, and I was feeling almost at peace with myself. First time for a long time. And I went home, and there was some situations going on at home, and then the night went on, and I was back at home, and then the partner I'd mentioned before decided that the best thing to do was to create a situation at home, and they did a very good job of it. And they basically, and I'll say this, I don't mind saying it, I'll say it in court, I'll say it until the day they put the last nail in my coffin. They made a wholly malicious allegation against me, and I made two significant mistakes that night. One I'm not going to mention, and the other one was I didn't dial 999 myself, and I'm going to regret that for the rest of my life. And the reason I'm going to regret that is because, as someone that had worked for the police for 15 years or more than 15 years, I expected a professional, unbiased approach when and if police officers attended my property. And unfortunately, that's not what happened.
Okay. What did happen?
Officers did attend my property. My partner had already left the property at that stage. I knew they had called 999, and as part of that call, I know what was said on that 999 call because I was present. I know that they walked back into the house at some stage, and I know that wasn't recorded on a 999 call. It was never mentioned in any transcripts. I know that police officers arrived at my premises. I know that I tried to explain to them what had happened. I made allegations against my partner, and I'd recorded not only the incident of that night, but I'd recorded previous incidents that had taken place and previous conversations, and effectively they didn't want to know.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they gave an excuse, and one of those excuses was that it wasn't me that dialed 999. I felt personally that it was because I was a man, and secondly, it was because of the job I did. And I've put that forward on a number of occasions that, and the force involved, which may get mentioned at some stage, that they basically ignored everything, saw me as a man and a police officer, and said, he's coming in. And I believe, and I still say it, and they disagree with me, they can disagree with me as much as they want. But the moment it was known that I was a police officer, it didn't matter what I said. It did not matter what I said. I was going in, and that was the end of it. It was almost like, and I find it's very sad, it was almost like someone thought they were getting a gold star that night by taking me in as a police officer. And the saddest thing about it is that moment ended my career.
Okay, so take us through what happened and how it happened from that point on.
Well, they ignored the fact, as I said, that I had brought up, that this was a malicious allegation, and I was arrested, was taken away. I was locked up for in excess of 15 hours. I suffer PTSD anyway, and anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and I had a number of those attacks. Provided a lengthy statement to them, a written statement. I provided a full and frank interview, and I was basically put on bail the next day, which made me homeless.
And from the police force that you worked for, what happened after that? So I'm taking it that you were arrested by another police force, and then and what happened? What was the transition after that? And what support did you receive?
Well, I had already phoned my own force, and the support from the officers that I had assigned to me, and when I say assigned to me, it wasn't so much they were assigned to me as I believe one had to be that officer and one had volunteered and asked if they could do that, be that person for me. I said yes, and I need it known now without any hesitation, two things, that they probably kept me alive. The job itself, I didn't know it on that night, but as far as the job went, I don't know. I don't know how to put it. I was alone. I felt ostracized. I felt that all the years I'd given, everything I'd done, every time I turned up for a job, every time I'd lost a rest day cancelled, every time I'd worked New Year's Eve or a holiday, everything, it didn't matter. It didn't matter anymore. It just didn't matter. The job basically didn't want to know, and I don't think that's fair. And I know that they have to stay impartial to an investigation, but I believe there needs to be some kind of mechanism put in place where your own force somehow, some way can do something more for you. They've got to be able to look at something and say, right, what what can we do for this person, this male, this female officer? What can we do? You know, and it's, you know, do we believe what's been said about them? Is there evidence? Is there a way we can talk to them? But they can't, because obviously there's an ongoing investigation. So how can they? But I know
Well,
how lonely I felt.
this is where I struggle because, you know, I've had my own personal experience of this. I've been through it myself, and I've probably felt exactly where and exactly how you felt. And I felt totally alone. Totally, you know, I say this now, and I will say this when I'm interviewed, because I am going to be interviewed. My story is going to be told. You know, if it wasn't for my partner, my close members of my friends and family, then I wouldn't have survived the, you know, year and a half of persecution. Really, I wouldn't have, and so I know exactly where you're coming from, but I can't see how you almost cut somebody adrift. That's how I would describe it. It's like you are, you know, you're clearly suspended from duty. You can't do the job that you do. You, you know, you're out of the loop completely, and that can't be right. You know, yes, there's an investigation going on, but they say that they assign a welfare officer to you, but my welfare officer was, well, extremely poor, and I, you know, and they were somebody that I considered to be a friend as well. Um, and I can't see how that is allowed to be. You know, you how do you cut people off and just leave them?
Well, I mean, that isolation, and I've heard this word said before. In fact, recently I read a very sad story, and I've heard about the isolation previously. You know, and to say I felt isolated is an understatement. It's an understatement because what I felt, and this took some months though before I started feeling this. I actually felt compassion for the officers that were looking after me. I'll explain that in a moment. But something you touched on that I did have colleagues, some colleagues that reached out to me, and I will never forget them. I had my very closest friends who gave me homes. I ended up sleeping in my car. I slept on a deck of a boat. I slept in a field. I slept under a railway bridge. I nearly froze to death one November in my car. And the isolation is one thing, but when I say I felt compassion, coming back to that word compassion from the two people looking after me, the two officers, I felt compassion for them because I thought in my eyes that they may face pressure themselves from the job by helping me and by being my support. And I think that was an awful feeling. That may have been misguided, but it was an awful feeling to think the two officers that were helping me may themselves come under the spotlight for helping me. And that is another element which I thought, that's not right. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's just not. But there was nothing. The fact that I'd reported myself before, yes, I provided that letter to the prosecution team and things like that. But it never helped. Nothing helped. I was given evidence after evidence after evidence. My partner was lying to get non-molestation orders. I told them that she was lying. I proved she was lying to get the non-molestation order, and they said nothing we can do. Don't want to know. The fact that materials were damaged in my own home. Again, I didn't understand that and still don't understand part of it. considering how long some of those items have been in my own home. And I openly admitted damaging an item by accident. The police force that were investigating me, I think when I went to custody on that first occasion, they were obviously switched on. Everything was by the book. Everything was by the book, you know, because they knew what was coming in, who was coming in. Not everyone, I'll hasten to add, but those who needed to know knew there was a police officer coming into custody. And, you know, and I respected them. I respected how they looked after me. And as I said, I had my own medical issues that night and didn't think I was going to survive the night. But when they made me homeless the next day, it was, my whole world fell apart. My whole world just fell apart. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to, who to call. Yeah, and I just thought, this is madness. This is madness. This is someone who spent their whole life, not just in the force, but their whole life trying to do right by people and help other people, and this is how you're treated.
I'll always say this to people, and I don't think people recognise it as much as they should, but I would say that pretty much everybody in society could be at least 3 to 6 months from being homeless on the street. It only takes bad luck. It only takes people acting in a malicious way towards you. And if you lose your home, which, let's face it, is the place that we should feel the safest, and you lose that because of a malicious allegation made against you, how did you know? How do you recover from that?
Well, I'm not too sure you ever do. I'm not too sure you ever do. You work with it, because obviously we've jumped a big gap there, but the in-betweens of it is, well, how do you cope with it to start with? You lose, you lose your mail address, you lose your banking address, you lose your rights to a doctor, you lose your rights to a dentist because you have to move away, because you've got orders that say you can't go here, you can't go there, you can't do this, and you have to move to a different county because it's the only place that someone's available to put you up. And I've moved, I think it's 8 times in 2 years. I can't use forwarding addresses on occasions because you then start to affect someone else's credit rating, and you get behind on your credit cards, and you get behind on your debits and your debts, and you can't get your teeth done, and you can't get medical attention. It's amazing. And what you just said about like the homeless and things like this, you are right. You are so right. 6 months. It is 6 months. And I think that's even probably an upper limit even. I think it could be 4 months or even less than that before you really struggle, which is why I think people on the streets really do at times struggle, because they don't necessarily want that, but there's not a lot of help. And I found out there, as a man, again, sadly, I could talk to a number of organisations, and everyone kept saying, talk to these people, give them a call, do this. I did all of that. I got fed up with talking to people time and time again over what had happened, what position I was in and everything. And you know what? No help out there for men. No help. Most of them were saying, have you thought about going to a hostel? Have you thought about going here? But what they don't understand is, and this is going to be unique, and this is where I don't know if the public will listen to this, I'm not sure, but it's where it's unique. As a police officer, it's not that simple. You cannot just go into a homeless hospital as a police officer, serving X, suspended or whatever, and there's no help. There is absolutely no help out there for that situation.
One thing that we need to really concentrate on, because and I'm going to be careful with how I kind of phrase it, but we all know the term, a phrase that is being used around the country ever since the very, very sad murder of Sarah Everard. Um, we have this violence against women and girls, um, which is being put out by seemingly every sort of police service, police force, or government department, etc., etc. And quite rightly, it's very important that that is a focus. However, I'm of the thought and the belief that violence against any person is wrong. So why are we targeting, and why are we, making it all about that phrase VAWG, where there isn't another focus on domestic violence that happens at the hands of women against men?
Yeah, well, that's something that I've looked into, obviously because of this, and also during my career as a police officer. And I think what's been highlighted the last few years, as you covered there, is just that. Every time I switch the radio on, it's someone saying, we've got to stop this, we've got to stop that, we've got to stop the violence against women, we've got to allow a woman to walk down the street or walk with a short skirt and all that. And you know what? I'm all for it. That's great. But what about the men? What about the guys that suffer in silence, end up taking their own lives, end up on occasions, unfortunately, flipping, and they do, and they will, the same as women will and do. But it's never ever spoken of. It's never spoken of. I mean, to sort of like skip backwards a bit because we jumped a bit, but I was arrested again and again and again and again and again and again, and I spent over 40 hours in custody, locked in a cell, having panic attacks, crying, crumpled in the corner, unable to breathe, being threatened with being sent to prison, um, remaining homeless, um, and the effect that had on me as a person was to take me to a place, and I think that's why this podcast is going to be the most important thing. It took me to one of the darkest places I've ever been in my life. As someone that had helped others, saved lives, it took me to a place where I fully understood at that time when I sat in my car how and why men of a certain age do take their own lives, do come to that decision. I'd always wondered about suicide, having dealt with it so often. I'd always wondered, what is it? What is it, that one thing at that one time, that one moment, where you just say, I'm done, I'm done, yeah? And as someone that suffered PTSD, horrendous PTSD, and mine was very complex at times, I sat there in my car and I recorded a video to my friends and family because of what my partner had done to me, how she had destroyed my life, my career, everything, everything I'd ever worked for my whole life in that one night. And I sat there, and I think other people have done this, and I'm not actually sure how. I'm not sure how I got through that night. I'm not sure because that video was my goodbye video. No one's ever seen it. I'm not sure anyone will see it. I've still got it. I can't watch it because it breaks me down. And I basically tell in that video what I was feeling. and why I wanted to do it, and why I wanted it to end that night. Because I just wanted the pain to stop. I just wanted the pain to stop. And the pain, sadly, is not a pain I can explain to someone. I can't. I will try it, and I can't. I can't explain that pain, because it's like being in a vice. It's like being hit by a tank. It's everything. It's everything you can ever imagine hitting you all at once. There's no physical pain. It's not physical. Sometimes it becomes physical, but it's a pain, and it's a pain you just have to stop. And you've exhausted all other means to stop that pain, be it painkillers, tranquilizers, be it whatever. You've exhausted, and you're exhausted, and I was exhausted. And I got through that night, and it's been hard. And it was, certain friends and family and police buddies afterwards that have got me through. And it's taken a long, long time to the day that I've come to this day. And I read a lot now. I look at positivity and everything, but going back to this and what this is about, I believe it was wrong. I believe, as a good officer, I was absolutely guilty until they could prove me guilty. I was ostracised by the force. I will name the force, the other one, because it's Hampshire Police. I've got no problems with that, and I'll stand in any court in any land, and I will still tell them the same. I do not understand how you can tell a CPS officer that someone has said or done something when they clearly haven't, and the evidence is there that says they didn't. I don't get it. It doesn't matter how minor that is. It doesn't matter how manipulated that is, because that's what was going on, manipulation of evidence, and the moment certain officers in Hampshire Police knew that I'd put in an IOPC complaint against them, that escalated. They had to find a way to get me charged. It didn't matter what they did. They had to find a way. And that goes right up to the level of PSD officers, because I've asked them, and I've asked them time and time again, to give me the evidence, to show me where that is said. Where does so-and-so say that? Where do I say that? Where is the evidence that I did that? And yet they will not do it. They say, we can't do that, we can't give it to you, we can't do this, it's available, I've listened to it, I've done that. See, well, you haven't, because I've got it. I've got the record. I haven't got a recording, they wouldn't give it to me. I've got the transcripts, it's not on there. I've got that, it's not on there. I've seen the same tapes that you've given me. So where is the evidence? Where is it? And how does this affect you as a person? I tell you how it affects you as a person. It mentally kills you. It physically kills you. Everything you've ever worked for your whole life comes tumbling down around you. And it's no wonder that police officers do take their own lives, because they've got no one else to turn to. They just run out of places to turn to.